right, good morning. He shall reign forevermore, amen? Man, it's so cool. I love that song. I love the story it tells about the baby boy and just how Jesus, Christmas season, my favorite. That's why we're not taking the decorations down till June. So, don't you love it? Isn't this cool? Like, who votes to keep this up for a long time? Yes, you just don't want to take it down. Don't worry, we'll have a night for that. We'll all get together for that, and we'll do that. All right, so we're in the new year. So typically in the new year, what happens? A pastor gets up here and he talks about your resolutions. Time to make your resolutions. What resolution are you going to make this year? Have you made any resolutions this year? Well, that's not what I'm going to do today. No, not. I'm looking at today, and I was trying to think, God, what do the people need to hear? I saw something on Facebook, and it was one of those memes, and it's a joke, and I forgot to bring it up, so I don't have it, but it said something about that moment when you realize that 2020 is 22. 2022 is 2022, and it's like 2020 all over again. And I was like, okay, so we got to preach to that. We got to preach to the struggles that we're having. A lot of us have come out of this season, come out of the Christmas season, we're excited, but a lot of us had a lot of pain. We have had a lot of pain in the last year. We've had a lot of hurt. We've had a lot of failure. And I was just kind of writing down some of this stuff and trying to think, like, in my own life or people that I've talked to, what's it looked like for them this past year? What regrets do they have, or what failures have happened in their life? And I just started listing them. And so, by the way, this is depressing pastor moment, so get ready, all right? I didn't exercise like I'd hoped to. How many people didn't do that? Yes, I didn't exercise like I hoped to. I didn't hit that weight goal. A lot of times the resolutions are, I want to get to this weight. I want to get to this position. I didn't save enough money. Who didn't save enough money this year? A lot of us. I spent too much money. Amazon. Thank you so much, Amazon. My goodness. I didn't get that job. That's a failure. That's a regret. I didn't learn something new. Some people set out, look, I want to learn something new this year, and then you get to the end of it, 2022 rings in a new year, and you look back and you're like, I didn't learn anything new this year. I failed more times than I succeeded in doing what was right and making good choices. I failed in relationships. We've all had those. But then there are some more. I feared life more than I embraced it in 2021. How many of us have done that? We feared life more than we embraced it. We didn't want to get up in the morning. We didn't want to go anywhere because we were afraid of all kinds of things. All kinds of things. I didn't give financially to God like I know I should have. That's a regret for a lot of people. A lot of people say, I wanted to give more to God this year. I wanted to give tithe and offering this year, but it didn't happen. I didn't lead a single person to Christ. Man. Great Commission, Jesus says, I want you to go into all the world. I want you to preach the gospel. I want you to baptize people in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I want you to tell them what's in my word. That's the command he gave us. He says, lead people to Christ. I didn't lead a single person to Christ this year. Is that your regret in 2021? I didn't make God more important in my life. I didn't get to know God as well as I would have liked. I didn't grow closer to God. I told you this was going to be depressing, right? It's a reality check. Because what happens at the end of the year is we're just ready to jump to the next thing and we forget about maybe some of the failures of the past. Or some of us do the opposite. We look at all those failures and we hold on to them. And we say, I can't do this year because I couldn't do it last year. God doesn't want to use my life. He can't use my life because look at the mess I made of it in 2021 or 2020 or 2019 or 1980 or whatever it is. Look at the mess of my life. God can't use my life. Well, what happened to you in 2021? Maybe it wasn't a failure on your part. Maybe it was a failure on someone else's part and it hurt you. How have you been harmed? We've all got pain. We've all got hurt, right? Were you hurt by relationships or people? Were you hurt by your circumstances or your situation? Were you hurt by a disease or a diagnosis? What harm came your way in 2021? Are you holding on to those pains? Well, I'm here today. I want to tell you, I'm going to read you a story in the Bible about someone who had failures, who had harms, who was absolutely just like everything in his world came tumbling down. And somehow, God did something amazing in that. Now, the story today is about a man who, for the most part, it wasn't his actions that got him in trouble. It wasn't his actions that put him in a place where he was a failure in the next year. But we can still take the principle and know that God can do things in our life even though we made a mess of it. If we made a mess of our life, if you're in here this morning and you're saying, look, God doesn't want any part of me because I'm a mess, I'm here to tell you differently. Jesus told us differently on that day when he was born. Jesus said, I came into this mess to fix your mess because I love you. And so that's what we're looking at today. I want to talk to you about a person. That's a lot of negatives that I read, right? I got ahead of my notes here, sorry. God can take your failures and your pain and do something good with your life. If, read it with me, you'll trust him. God can take your pains, your failures, the places that you've fallen short, the hurt, the harm, anything, your circumstances, he can take it and do something good with it because that's what God does. Remember I told you about our life is like we're in a shoebox. And all we can see is the sides of the walls around us and we can't see what's going on, but God is holding that shoebox and he sees the whole picture. And so we often get stuck looking at the box and we can't see the rest of the surroundings. And God's like, I got a whole plan for you, buddy. I got a plan for your life. 2022 can be greater for you than 2021 if you let go of the past. If you let go of the hurt. If you cast your cares on him because he cares for you. If you come to him weary and heavy laden, he will give you rest. 2022 can be a greater year for you than any other year in your life if you'll trust him. Joseph trusted God. Joseph didn't let the pain of his past dictate his future. Instead, he let God dictate his future. That's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at what happens when we trust God and allow him to take the pain of our past, the pain and our struggles, and dictate our future. We're going to see all this. So I invite you to turn in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 50. And let's just start here in verse 15. Genesis 50, verse 15. It says here, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? All right, we're going to stop there. One verse in, we're good, right? We're going to stop there. Let's back it up here and let's tell the story. How do we get to this place? Joseph's brothers, Joseph and all of his brothers, they were the sons of Jacob, otherwise known as Israel, and they were the sons of them. And Joseph was kind of the baby. You know, he was the baby at one point in his life before Benjamin came along. And Joseph was loved by his dad. But Joseph was a dreamer, literally a dreamer. I mean, the guy had dreams that would prophesy the future, and him being naive and his inability to read the room, he talks to his brothers one day and says, hey guys, I had a dream that one day you're all going to bow down to me. I mean, come on. I mean, Isaiah, you got an older brother. What if he said, Anyway, so this is Joseph's story. So Joseph, being naive, he's just excited to tell his brothers the dreams, and he's telling them all this stuff that's going to happen. And so his brothers are frustrated with him. They're irritated because Daddy loves him more than the rest of us. And then he gives him this awesome coat, this coat of many colors, and he wears this coat, and it's like, oh my goodness, the brothers can't get enough. They're just like, I'm done with this kid. And so what they end up doing is they talked about killing him. But they didn't kill him, and so they ended up selling him into slavery, and he ends up all the way in Egypt. And when he gets to Egypt, he's enslaved and he does some things and he ends up working in this guy's Potiphar's house. And he works in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar loves him because like Joseph is really like getting his finances in order. He's organizing everything the way it needs to organize. But Potiphar's got a wife who's excited about Joseph being there in a bad way and wants to, really be with him, and he says no, and so she ends up accusing him of rape. And so he goes to jail. And he's in jail, and he meets a couple of the king's people who came in there, the guy who served him wine, or the grapes, and the bread guy. I'm drawing a blank on it, but he's talking to these guys, and they had upset the king at one point, and so they're back here, they're in prison, and all of a sudden they both have dreams, and they find out that Joseph can interpret these dreams. And so Joseph interprets the dream, says, one guy, you're going to die, the other guy, you're going to get, the king is going to bring you back up. When you get back up there, when you're by his side again, tell him I'm here, and I don't need to be here. And so years go by, and it happens, and eventually this guy remembers, oh, wait, Joseph, somebody special who was in jail, who got me in this position, Joseph can do some special things, and the king needs his dreams interpreted. So Joseph interprets the dream for the king, and next thing you know, Joseph is the prime minister of all of Egypt. So this boy who goes from being hated by his brothers to being a slave is all the way moved up through all this pain, all this hardship, all this struggle, and he ends up the prime minister of Egypt, and he sets up the whole nation to thrive and survive in the midst of a famine. And that's where we're at today. That's where we're picking up in this verse. It says, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, Jacob had died. They had gone at that point already to Egypt, and they needed food during the famine, and so Joseph was there, and they realized it was him eventually, and he said it was him, and all this kind of stuff. And so now they're worried. What's going to happen with Joseph now? Because our family will die in this famine. What's he going to do to us? How is he going to repay us? What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? Have you ever noticed that sometimes that when people's situations change, they remember the past? Something happens, and then, maybe a relationship breaks, and then all of a sudden, all the memories from all of your other mess-ups happen. They come back into your life. Well, sometimes people remember different things in their lives. They remember, let me back up for a second. If you're going through a struggle right now, who are the people that you can go to that help you through that struggle the most? They're people that are empathetic, but they're people that have been through that as well, right? And so what happens in the process is you watched someone go through the thing that you're going through right now. And then when your situation changed, you were brought to a place that you went back in your mind to what that person did and how they reacted. And so, right here with this point here with these guys, Joseph he's not holding a grudge against these guys. He's not going to. We're going to see that going forward. And I just wanted to point out something, just a side note, that people will watch the way that you react to pain, and it will influence their life. People will watch the way that you react to hurt and heartache, and it will influence their life. So let's jump forward. Verse 16 and 17, it says, So they sent word to Joseph saying, Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they've committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. When their message came to him, Joseph wept. I had to read that over and over and over again. I was trying to understand, why would Joseph cry? Well, he's upset that his dad has died, but there's no indication here that his dad actually sent these messages forward. Like this could be a total lie. These guys were afraid of how Joseph was going to react, so they concocted this story about, oh, well, Jacob, dad said something. We better make sure that Joseph knows that dad said for him not to retaliate against us. And when that message came to him, Joseph wept. Maybe he wept because he was disappointed that they hadn't changed. Maybe he wept because he was disappointed that they thought so low of his own character that he would be the type to retaliate. I don't know why he wept, but it just says that he did. Joseph wept because maybe there was pain there. There were issues there. And so then his brothers, it continues, it says, his brothers then came and threw themselves down before him, and they said, "We are your slaves." And this is where we get to the best part of this whole passage. This next word. But Joseph said to them. All the pain, all the past, everything that had happened to him, all the struggles, put him in a position where he could have looked at these men and he could have thrown them in jail. He could have said no to the food. He could have said, "No, I'm going to do to you what you did to me." It says here, but Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God?" That is a really, really cool statement. It's an amazing statement because Joseph understood where he stood. Joseph understood where his life fit in the grand scheme of things. Joseph understood that he was in a shoebox and he couldn't see everything else. But God could. And he says, "Am I in the place of God?" He said, "It's not my place to seek justice against you. That's on God. It's not my place to know why you did the things that you did. It's not my place to be frustrated about how you treated me and now to retaliate in response to that." He says, "No, am I in the place of God?" But before that, did you see what he said? Don't be afraid. He looks at his brothers, these guys who are terrified. And because he understands his place, he says, "Look, I don't want you to fear. Don't fear me. Am I in the place of God?" And then the next verse is really cool. He continues the theme. He says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." So often when we have breakdowns in relationships and struggles and pain, we just want to brush it under the rug, right? We don't want to admit that it happened, or we get, we'll just let time heals all wounds, we say. And so then we go back and we see that person and we act like the hurt was never there. We act like the pain was never there. We act like they never did anything to us. Well, right here, Joseph doesn't do that. He doesn't say, "Oh, it's all right, guys, you didn't do anything." No, he says, "You harmed me. You intended to harm me." In fact, in the Hebrew, it says, you tried to pay evil against me. You did evil toward me. But God intended it for good. Why? To accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. If Joseph never interprets the dream, if his brothers never get upset, if they never send him into slavery, if he never becomes Potiphar's servant, if he never gets thrown in jail, if he never interprets the dreams, if he never does any of that, he never gets in position to be the prime minister, he never gets in a place to have Egypt thriving in the midst of a famine, he never gets to a place to be able to bring his family, his whole family, into Egypt so that they can thrive and continue. And what happens if none of this happens? Israel's family dies. And if there's no Israel, there's no Jesus. There's no "He shall reign forevermore." But God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. He says, "Look, guys, look right now. God is saving all kinds of lives by the choices that you made for my life. God is changing lives. He's saving lives by the things that have happened to me. And yes, it was terrible. I admit it was terrible. It was painful. You intended evil for me. But God's working outside of that. You see, God's doing something special in my life. And look how many people He's helping because of it." You know, I have to, as I was reading that verse, I was drawn to Romans 8:28. I couldn't get that thought out of my head in Romans 8:28. Joseph may not have had Romans 8:28 all those years ago because it was ahead of him. It was in his future. But he understood the principle of it, and we can have that today. And it says this. It says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." That's one of those verses, it's almost like cliche. Somebody loses a family member. What, God works all things for good. And you're like, it's not good right now. But see, here's the thing. It's because we misunderstand what it means when we say God works for the good of those who love him. We misunderstand because we don't read the rest of the verses all the way through and understand what it's talking about is what God is doing is he's working his system. He's working his plan. But individually in each of us, he's growing us to a place to be like Christ. The day that we get to be like Christ is a good day. We know that God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. He's going to build us to be like Christ, and he's going to accomplish his purpose in our lives. So, Pastor Andrew, what in the world does this have to do with 2022? Well, this is what it has to do with. What's going on in your life right now that you're saying, this is not good, this is not good, this is not good, that you need to step out of the box and say, God, I need you to show me something here today. I need your help. I'm lost and I can't see the future. And if I can't see the future, I don't know how to take a step forward. And God says, trust me. Just trust me. Do you need to trust him today? What's your 2022 look like? Where is the trust factor in your life? Okay, so Joseph continues. He says, so then don't be afraid. Hey, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and he spoke kindly to them. Joseph wasn't all words. He actually did. He took care of these people. Now, as I'm looking, there's just a couple things I'd just like to point out here. We get back to the point. What you can take home with you. Don't let your past dictate your future. Instead, let God dictate your future. Do you understand me here? Don't look at your past and say, oh, because my past is so bad, or because I've had so many failures this last year, or because I can't. Instead, let God decide what you can do. Let God decide what your future looks like, because we don't know what God is going to do with our lives. I've told you this story before. I almost died in 2001. I was in the Navy, and I wanted to be a pilot, and I was all excited to be a pilot, but God said no. He said, you're going to get sick, you're going to get out of the military, you're not going to be able to do that because I have a plan for your life. And so at the time, I was angry. I was so mad at God. Why did you take this away from me? But today, I can look back and I say, wow, thank you so much for taking that away from me because you gave me so much more. You gave me something special. You dictated my future. I couldn't see it. I didn't know it. But you did it special, God. One of the things that I was talking about with somebody this week, this is just a side note as we're looking at 2022. Sometimes we get hung up on our hurts. We get hung up on the people that hurt us, right? We get hung up on the things that they've done. And in the vein of we've got to trust God in our circumstances, we've got to trust God in our relationships, I need you to remember something, that unmet expectations lead to disappointment and frustration. Unmet expectations lead to disappointment and frustration. When we expect people to be perfect, we are going to be disappointed. And that hurt can get in the way of us trusting God. So we have to base our expectations in God rather than in people. And so what it looks like to trust God in 2022 is not to set expectations on people to be perfect, because people are going to fail you. Don't set expectations on your circumstances to be perfect, because your circumstances are going to fail you. You could lose your job next week. You could wreck your car. You could lose a family member. But we have to base our expectations. God, what are you going to do in 2022? How can I continue to trust you even when it doesn't look right? That's what we've got to do. So next steps. What can I do to make 2022 greater than 2021? It was really, really cool this morning as I was in my office, and I was just kind of putting together the last couple things here. Actually, I was driving here to the church this morning, and I was just thinking, what is it that people can do in 2022? Well, the first thing they've got to do is they've got to come to a place where they understand they need God. And I couldn't help but remember the song. We sang it this morning. God so loved. Bring all your failures, bring your addictions, come lay them down at the foot of the cross. Why? Because Jesus is waiting there with open arms. 2021 may have had some great times, but it also might have had some difficult times. Jesus is waiting there with open arms if you just give those things to him. But here's one of the things I want you to do this year. Commit to trust God in all circumstances this year. I wasn't going to give you resolutions, and it's not really a resolution. It's just something to think about. Commit to trust God in all circumstances this year. In order to do that, though, you have to, know him. How can you trust somebody you don't know? You have to commit to, what does it look like to commit to trust God? Well, if I'm going to trust God, then I'm going to commit to some other things. I'm going to commit to reading my Bible every single day. One verse. Can you commit to one verse for 1 month? Read one verse every single day for one. I promise it'll change your life. Commit to prayer 3 times a day, not just at meals. Can you do that? Fall asleep in prayer. That is one of the most special things. I've done that before, and it's just, I wake up refreshed in the morning like I never have been. It's really cool. Commit to prayer. Did you fail this last year in leading a single person to Christ? Well, then commit to intentionally doing your part to make that happen this year. And I don't mean walk up to somebody and say, hey, here's the gospel. Jesus loves you. He died for you. You need to be saved. No, that's easy. The hard part is asking the question, have you ever given your life to Christ? Have you committed your life to Christ? That's one of the things I'm going to be talking about all year this year, is we must be intentional in not just giving the gospel, but in asking people where they're at. Make them answer the question. It doesn't matter how much we've failed in the last year. How many times have you failed? You've walked up to someone and you thought, man, the Spirit's telling me I got to do something, and you haven't done it. Well, this coming year, commit to doing it. Commit to prayer. Be intentional in not only giving the gospel, but ask at least one person if they've committed their life to Christ. Fast for 24 hours. One day, just fast. From something. Maybe you don't eat your meals. Maybe you only eat 2 meals a day or something. Maybe don't get that morning coffee. And take that time to pray. Step out in faith in one area of your life in the first 6 months. God, I'm going to give to you this year financially. I'm going to give to my church. I'm going to give for 6 months, 10% of my income. I'm going to tithe. That's what tithe means, 10%. I'm going to do it. I'm going to trust you even if I don't have it. Doesn't matter if you failed in 21, because we're in 22. Don't let your past dictate your future. Let God dictate your future. But in order to let go of the past, you have to focus on the future that God has for you. You can't focus on a future with God. You can't focus on trusting God if you don't know Him. So you got to get in His Word. You got to pray. And then you got to do the things He's telling you to do. Be intentional. All right? All right, worship team, come on up here and let's sing a song about His grace. Because it's only by His grace that we're going to be able to trust Him. God, give me grace when I fail so that I can look up the next day and continue moving forward.